All right, I want you to notice verse 22 of 2 Timothy 2. It says, "Flee also youthful lusts, but follow righteousness, faith, charity, peace with them that call on the Lord out of a pure heart." Now, as Christians, and especially I think as fundamental Baptists, we often preach a lot, and as we should, on taking a stand, on facing enemies, on fighting battles, enduring hardness. But, while we should do all those things, there are actually some things we should just run from. And we think of running from something as kind of a cowardly thing. But the reality is there are some situations where you should just run. There is a time to stand, but there is a time to just absolutely bolt, run. The original 1611 King James says fly also youthful lusts, which is just how they used to say flee and fly. And just kind of the fly you fools is a line everybody knows. It's just like, get out of here. And there are some situations, if you find yourself there, it's not time to take a stand. It's not time to face it. Sometimes there are times to just turn tail and run and let people call you whatever they want. It's just wisdom to do that. And so I want to talk about those things tonight. I want to talk about things that we should just run from. I want to talk about specifically too about knowing when to run. Obviously, I can't possibly describe every scenario, every situation where you are supposed to run, but hopefully we can give you enough principle in this sermon that you will know when to actually run. And there are times we need to do that. There are some battles that we would be foolish to even try to fight. And not only have we been not called to fight those battles, but sometimes we have been told and commanded to run from those things. And so if you see that situation and you absolutely bolt, it doesn't mean you're a coward. It means you're obedient. It means you have some wisdom. When we were in Montana the other day, we were out walking through Glacier National Park, and one of the things that I asked one of the rangers at a place, I was asking questions about things, and I was like, what are the chances of us seeing a bear out here and it attacking us? And she said, well, I'd carry bear spray with you. And we didn't have any. And she's like, but it'll probably be all right. Well, we noticed almost everybody out there was carrying bear spray but us. And so it made us a little bit nervous because it's like, I don't know. And fortunately, we didn't see any bears and nothing attacked us. But at the same time, if you saw me running from a grizzly bear, would you call me a coward? Or is that just wise? And you know what? If I ever saw a grizzly bear and I ran away from it and you called me a coward, wouldn't bother me a bit. I would just keep running. I would run fast. And I'd be like, well, you know what? Fine. I'll be the coward. You be brave and you go face it. That'll give me more time to get away. It wouldn't bother me at all. So there are situations where we should run. And so some things that we should run from, according to the scriptures and according to just wisdom itself, one of the things I want to talk about is temptation. Temptation is something we ought to just run from. Matthew 6:13, this is something we ought to pray. We ought to pray, Lord, help us not to go into temptation. It says, and lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom and the power and the glory forever. Amen. And we just got our second child through prison dating. And the reality is prison dating is just that. It's avoiding a lot of unnecessary temptation. There are temptations. In fact, there's something wrong with a couple if there's not going to be certain temptations in certain situations. So because of the fact, too, we are trying to raise normal heterosexual people. Whenever we go to this dating thing, because we understand the clear command to not fornicate, you know what we do? We try to not lead our children into temptation. So I don't understand, Pastor Tommy, why you don't let your children, and I'm going to preach this right now, too, for some reason. I feel the need to continue preaching on this a little bit more, because we don't want to lead them into temptation. We are supposed to pray that we will not be led into temptation. So why, as a parent, why would I want to lead my children into temptation and have them dating like the world dates? It's not right. The results are bad. It's not working. It's a failure. It's a sin against God, the things that go on in there. And Christian kids will be tempted just like lost kids will be tempted if they are in those situations. So what do? We put in certain parameters in place. You know what? Because we are running from temptation. We're running from it. It's just wisdom to do that. And we ought to be and sometimes We might find ourselves in a situation where we will be tempted, but it ought to be our goal to just not get there. And if we can foresee something being a tempting and a compromising situation, you know what we ought to do? We ought to avoid it. Just like we all avoid certain parts of Chicago at certain parts of the day or the night, you know what? We ought to avoid certain scenarios in our life because temptation is difficult, and we ought to regularly pray for the Lord to not lead us into temptation. Luke 22:40 says, and when he was at a place, he said unto them, pray that ye enter not into temptation. When they went to the Garden of Gethsemane, he said, pray. Hey, you are about to face a situation where you are going to be tempted to do the wrong thing. Things are about to get very difficult. Things are about to get tough. Pray that you don't go into temptation. Why? Because the spirit indeed is willing, but the flesh is weak. That's what he says in Matthew 26:41. Watch and pray that ye enter not into temptation. The spirit indeed is willing, but the flesh is weak. Right now, when we are sitting in church, teenagers too, okay? Teenagers, they go to youth conferences and they hear all this preaching, and I'm not against it. I'm actually for this, but think about this, okay? Those of you that are getting ready to go to camp and stuff too, and those of you who've been to camp, when you are at camp, getting preached at 2 or 3 times a day, reading your Bible every day, getting away from the television for a week, okay? When you're in that scenario and a preacher gets up and tells dramatic stories about kids who've gotten in trouble, who gave into temptation, and how it destroyed their lives, and it talks about the evil, they tell you about the evils and dangers of pornography, and we've got to do that. That is important. We were just talking this afternoon just about some of the trouble that can get you in today, and how these things can just ruin your lives. And so we do. Listen, kids, when you are in that scenario, the last thing you are going to want to do after a sermon like that, after horror stories, the last thing you're going to feel like doing is looking at pornography when you are in that situation. But let me tell you, while your spirit is willing that day, and while it's good to make commitments to not do those things, and the purpose in your heart, use that. I am for all that stuff. But what teenagers have got to get a hold of is something horrible is going to happen when you leave that place and you go back to your cell phone, you go back to your television, you go back to your other friends. Your flesh is still weak. Your spirit is willing. If you're saved, that new man that is in you says, stay away from that stuff. But that old man, this flesh, says, go for that stuff. And I'm telling you, what you are going to have to do, if you're going to change anything, of course you don't feel like it after that sermon. Of course in your mind, I will never do anything like that. But you know what you need to understand? That when you leave that camp, you need to be praying that you won't enter temptation. And it will help if you don't give yourself opportunities to do these things. It's just going to lead you into temptation, and it's okay for you to run from that. You are not weak as a young man. You are wise as a young man if you tell your parents, hey, I can't handle the internet. I can't handle a smartphone. I can't handle a computer in my room. I can't handle cable television. If you tell your parents you can't handle that stuff, you're not weak. That doesn't mean they can't trust you. No, that means that shows you have some wisdom there. And the reality is they shouldn't trust you with too much, because that's just foolish to just let them enter into temptation. It's a dangerous thing, and so we need to watch out for it. We need to recognize how prone to sin our flesh is. We need to learn from all who have been destroyed by the things that tempt us. 1 Corinthians 10:13 says, there hath no temptation taken you, but such as is common to man. But God is faithful, who will not suffer you to be tempted above that ye are able, but will with the temptation also make a way to escape, that ye may be able to bear it. Wherefore, my dearly beloved, flee from idolatry. And something we need to get a hold of. People get confused on this, and I understand why. Because we see where God did tempt Abraham, but then we also see in the New Testament where God does not tempt any man with sin. And there's a difference between you being tempted, like God is not going to dangle sinful things in front of you. Okay, God's not going to do that. God is not going to one day just like, you know what, I'm going to put this person to a test and then dangle some evil like pornography or something in front of them. That's not how God tempts. Now, what God might do, God might tempt you in the sense of He's going to allow you to face certain challenges. He might allow you to face certain, For example, he might ask you to do something difficult, to go witness to somebody. He might tempt you in the sense of, hey, are you going to show boldness here? Or are you going to be a coward? And he might put you in a difficult situation where you are challenged to do the right thing, where it might cost you to do the right thing. Maybe you'll see something at work that's being done that's wrong or illegal, or maybe, and you're being tempted to not do the right thing. And God might allow you to see it, to see what you're going to do. So again, there's a big difference between dangling sin in front of somebody trying to get them to taste it, and God allowing you to face a situation where you've got to make a choice to do the right thing. There is a difference there, but just understand, even with that temptation, God will always make a way of escape. If it is God tempting you, God's trying to teach you patience, and He will make a way to escape. If it is from God, you don't have to sin, and you better not sin. And so just understand that people who sin, it destroys them. We're not going to take time to read it. Earlier in chapter 10, it uses Israel as an example about how they were tempted in the wilderness and how they failed. And what did God tempt them with in the wilderness? God tempted them in the sense of He let them get a little bit hungry to see if they would trust Him. He let them get a little bit thirsty to see if they would trust Him. God didn't dangle sin in front of them. It was Balaam that tempted them with fornication. It was God that just tempted them with being... Is it a sin to get hungry? Is it a sin to get thirsty? No. But it is a sin when we don't trust God. So understand the major difference there. God doesn't tempt with sinful things. But either way, we ought to pray that, Lord, if it be your will, don't let me go through temptation. It's okay to not trust yourself. But just understand, if it is from God, if the temptation is from Him, you can escape. You can do the right thing. God will give you the ability, and if you fail in that situation, it's your fault, nobody else's. Because a lot of people just have this attitude, oh, I just fell into temptation. It was more than anybody could have bore. No, it wasn't. If it was from God, you could have bore it. You could have escaped it. And the reality is, whenever we do give into temptation, we're just following the lust of our own flesh. We see in 1 Timothy 6:6, but godliness with contentment is great gain. For we brought nothing into this world, and it is certain we can carry nothing out, and having food and raiment, let us be therewith content. But they that will be rich fall into temptation and a snare, and into many foolish and hurtful lusts, which drown men in destruction and perdition. For the love of money is the root of all evil, which while some coveted after, they have erred from the faith, and pierced themselves through with many sorrows. But thou, O man of God, flee these things, and follow after righteousness, godliness, faith, love, patience, and meekness. Do you all see what he's saying? What he said, you man of God. And he's not just talking to the preacher there, to the man of God. No, a man of God in the New Testament, I've preached on this before. This is basically just an example of anybody who's a good example of a Christian. You don't have to get an ordination to be a man of God according to the New Testament. That's another sermon for another day. But understand, God wants all of us following after that which is righteous. And there are money, power, fame. There's just certain things that if we allow these things to, they can tempt us, and they can get us, and they can cause us to fall for all kinds of evil things. The reality is, while all of us would like to be rich and have a lot of money, the truth is most of us probably couldn't handle it. The reality is, if all of a sudden we did get those millions of dollars, probably the first thing that would happen is we get out of the will of God. We all think we would do all these wonderful things with it, but the reality is we'd probably get out of the will of God. And so just understand that, while the temptation of being poor is that we don't trust God, which in 1 Corinthians 10, we see that got Israel in a lot of trouble. But the temptation of being rich is getting involved in all kinds of sin and debauchery that destroys all kinds of people. So the reality is, I'm not saying you have to want to be poor, but at the same time, we ought to be fleeing these lusts. We ought to be fleeing anything. We ought to be running from anything that's going to take us away from righteousness and godliness. We ought to run from it. It's like, I can't handle that. I can't handle all that money. There was a famous individual I met one time. Didn't know he was famous when I met him, but I found out afterwards he was famous. and he had got famous, made all kinds of money, and then just destroyed his life with it. And then, but he got in church, started doing good, and this pastor was telling me about how this individual is in a really difficult spot right now because he's kind of been offered an opportunity to make a comeback in the secular world. He's been offered an opportunity to make a whole lot of money. The problem is, the last time he made a whole lot of money, he got involved and gave into a whole bunch of temptations that got him in a lot of trouble. And since he's been on fire for God, like a lot of us, we're not really rolling in the dough. And so there's that temptation to not trust for God's provision and live by that concept of man shall not live by bread alone, but by every word that proceeds from the mouth of God. And he said, be praying for him. I don't really know what happened in that situation. I haven't followed up with him since then. But he said, be praying for him because, he's got a big choice to make right now. And the temptation was there. If that individual was smart, understanding what happened to him last time he was in that situation, I think he should run from it. And that's easy for me to say. I'm not being offered a whole bunch of money. But we all understand that, that's probably the best thing. Most of us, if we're real honest with ourselves, we couldn't handle the millions. We couldn't handle all of those things. And so it's okay to run from it. Maybe that's going to be my excuse for being poor. I'm just running from them youthful lusts because I'm running from riches. And if I am, man, I am doing great. But anyway, I'm not, I've always thought I could handle the temptation of having a lot of money. And I've prayed that the Lord will one day give me an opportunity to prove myself in that situation. And I really think I would do good. I really think I would. I just haven't been able to get the Lord to agree with me on that. But anyway, again, I don't think you're a coward if you run from these things. If that guy, found out he turned down all that money because he's like, I can't handle the temptation, I would say, well done. What wisdom. That's okay to run from that. Again, I don't think you're brave if you go try fighting the grizzly bear. I think you're foolish if you try doing that thing. You're probably going to lose. Unless you're Davy Crockett or Chuck Norris or somebody like that, you're probably going to lose fighting the grizzly bear. James 1:2 says, my brethren, count it all joy when ye fall into divers temptations. Now that seems a little contrary to that. On one place it's saying, pray you don't into temptation, but here it's saying, count it all joy when ye fall into divers temptation, knowing this, that the trying of your faith worketh patience. And here's another concept you need to understand, something people get confused. Obviously all these things, they do fit together if properly applied. But understand, there is a massive difference between falling into temptation and diving into temptation. Do y'all understand that? And again, while I think we all would want to do the right thing, I like to think that if I had an opportunity to be martyred, I would be martyred. I'd like to think before I would deny Christ, I would let him kill me. Before I would ever bow the knee to an idol, before I'd ever take the mark of the beast, I like to believe that I would do the right thing and I would die. But it's okay for me to say, hey, Lord, I hope I don't get asked to be martyred tomorrow. Lord, I pray I don't enter into that temptation. It's okay. And I think it's wise to pray for that we can avoid these things. However, if I find myself in that situation, if I fall into it, if it just happens, it's not my fault. And understand, there's a lot of people like that. There's missionaries and stories I've heard about terrible situations they found themselves in and great temptations, and they did the right thing and the Lord delivered them. But folks, they didn't dive into those things. They just found themselves there. And you know what typically is going to happen if one day you're doing the will of God, you're serving God, and you find yourself in a very tempting situation? I believe you're more likely to do the right thing. Because it's God trying to do something. It's God trying to produce something in you. And if you are obedient to God, it will work out for good. But at the same time, if I am somebody who is diving into temptation, I don't really think that I am going to have God's help in that situation. If I go and I'm hanging out at the bars and I'm hanging out at the casinos and I'm hanging out at these places with all the worldly women and things like that, and I find myself in temptation there, I don't really believe God is going to help me like he is maybe some missionary who finds himself in a difficult situation. I'm doing something I should not be doing. I'm doing something that's foolish, and I don't believe that's God trying to work patience in me. Well, I'm going to go hang out at the bars, and I'm going to go hang around all the floozies out there just so I can learn some patience. No, you're an idiot. You need to run from those places. You need to flee those kind of places. There's a big difference between finding yourself in a difficult situations where if all of a sudden one day you are doing right, you are doing God's will, and you find yourself in that, just understand, hey, this is God trying to work something in me, and then you count it all joy. But either way, I'm still going to pray that, I'm going to pray that I don't go into temptation tomorrow. I don't want to be tempted tomorrow. I don't want to face anything like that. I don't want to have somebody pointing a gun in my head. I don't want to have somebody threatening me with hanging or something like that. I don't want any of that kind of thing. But I hope if I ever do, I will do the right thing. But I'm going to pray that it doesn't happen. And so what a lot of people do, they'll take this stuff with temptation where they go and they dive into a tempting situation. The Lord tested me and I just failed. No, that wasn't the Lord testing you. No, you were being a fool and you got in trouble. That's what happened. And so don't use temptation as an excuse for indulging in sin. And again, there are people out there, we've seen the videos of people trying to do crazy parkour stuff and getting hurt and things like that. It's like, no, you were being foolish. You're not really a victim. You're not really somebody we should feel sorry for when you were being a fool and something weird happened and you got hurt. But that's how a lot of Christians act. They go and they put themselves in compromising situations. They go to places they should be running from. Something happens and then they act like they came under some spiritual attack. No, that was not some satanic spiritual attack. That was you being a fool. I know of a situation too where there was a guy who did something extremely wicked and unthinkable and perverted and got busted. And then the response from his preacher friends, I'll be praying for this person. They came under a satanic spiritual attack. What? In getting busted? Was that the satanic spiritual attack when they got busted and it ruined their reputation? Or was it a satanic spiritual attack when they gave into that filthiness? What are you even talking about? If so, are you saying this guy is satanic? You can But a lot of times when people say it's a satanic spiritual attack, it's a way to try to take away responsibility from that individual. That's what it really is. And that's a bunch of foolishness. It's a bunch of nonsense. Don't ever fall for that kind of thing. One of these days, I need to put something out there just showing the creative ways Baptists have come up with to just explain away perverted behavior. It is amazing how manipulative preachers are. And I did a whole series about proclamation or manipulation. I could have done a whole thing about just the way we describe our own sins compared to the way we describe other people's sins. And it is manipulative. It is crooked. I just got the idea for that sermon. That one might be coming in the near future. I don't know. We'll see what happens. That way I can never do those things. Because it is so stinking wrong. It is so stinking wrong. And just, one example of that, and I've given this example before, but this is what preachers do when they're in the flesh and being carnal and they're manipulating. A preacher I do not like falls into sin, or something bad. Let's say something bad happens to a preacher I don't like. God judge them for being against me or doing whatever it is I don't like. Preacher I like has something bad happen to him. Satan's attacking them for all they're doing for God. Do y'all see how messed up that is? Okay, and understand, I wish I could tell y'all you can trust Baptists. They are the last people you should ever trust sometimes. I hate to even say that, but it is just reality. You just can't trust Baptist preachers, especially when they're talking about other people. That's a whole other subject for another day, but man, as a movement, as a group, that is an area where we need great repentance. Baptists have lost all credibility in so many of these things, and that, which is going to get into my next point, And I don't want to spend too much time on this, but back to these temptations. There are many things. For example, too, there are items, okay? Like this here, this is an item. It's a microphone. It's amoral, okay? Now what you do with it, like the music you sing with it, you can sing good music with it, you can sing really raunchy music with it. The problem is not the microphone, okay? The problem is it's what you do with it. It's like guns, okay? I think guns are wonderful tools. That you can do many good things. You can protect your family with guns. You can feed your family with guns by shooting animals and things. You can have fun with guns. There's a lot of good things you can do, but there's a lot of evil you can do. The gun's not the problem. It's what you do with the gun. And there are some things that some of us maybe shouldn't have. There are some things that some of us maybe should just have enough wisdom to say, I can't handle that thing. If you do have just an explosive temper and you're always wanting to murder everybody, I don't think you should have guns. I think maybe you ought to say, yeah, you know what? If you're just prone to doing that kind of thing, yeah, you know what? Don't get a gun. But just because you have a problem with it doesn't mean the rest of us do. Some of us are all about gun control. And for us, gun control is about how to hit your target. Amen. But anyway, like a remote control. A remote control, it saves you from getting up and turning the channel like you had to do back in the old days. I remember being my dad's remote control. I'm that old. Or we were that far behind the times. where we had old TVs where we'd have to go turn the channel and things like that. But it's what you do with it. It's where you go with it. Things like a computer. Okay, that computer is a wonderful tool. You can do many good and productive things with. That mouse and that keyboard, those are tools that you can do good and productive things, but you can take those same things and you can do evil things with it. And some people might just need to say, hey, I am way too prone to sin in some of these, with these things. I shouldn't have one. There are some people that shouldn't have social media. There are some people that shouldn't have a computer. There are some people that shouldn't have a smartphone. There are some people who shouldn't have a credit card. They're just going to get themselves in too much trouble. There are some people that shouldn't have a cell phone because we need to recognize our temptations. Personally too, like let's RFK for example. Okay, trying to make America healthy again. A part of me is like, yes, I like this. This is good. Something needs to be done. At the same time, too, I don't really like the government telling me what I can and can't eat. I like that freedom there. And so the reality is, it's like, yet some people probably shouldn't be eating certain food, but some people can. Some people know how to manage these things and eat it in moderation. Just because some people live on ice cream doesn't mean none of us should ever get ice cream. Okay? Sometimes you got to eat some ice cream, folks, especially Cold Stone Creamery. And I didn't get paid for an advertisement for that. They should give me one. That's good stuff. But it's pleasurable stuff. I don't know if it's actually good for you. But there's some people that they just need to say, I can't go there. In fact, I was just watching somebody yesterday. They were drinking Dr. Pepper. I don't drink Dr. Pepper anymore because I can't moderate soda. I haven't drank, I think it's so close to 3 years since I've drank soda. It's like 2 or 3 years. It's like 2 or 3, and the last time it was Dr. Pepper, and it was because of Brother Chris. He brought me the good kind in the glass bottle with the old formula. That was the last time I drank Dr. Pepper. How long ago was that? That was like 2 years. That was the last time. And now, but you know what? I'm not going to get up here and preach against Dr. Pepper. When I was younger, it didn't really hurt me that bad, but I got to an age where it's just like, you know what? I can't outrun this bad diet. And I can't control soda. If I allow it in my life, it's all I drink. I drink it way too much. I get caffeine headaches and all that kind of stuff. And so I had to cut it out of my life. And I can't handle it anymore. I thought one time I went 30 days no caffeine. Another time I went 40 days. Once I went 40, I think 42 was my max. And I thought, now I will have the discipline to drink it in moderation. Nope. And it's because of Dr. Pepper. Especially, it's such a wonderful thing, but I can't handle it. So it's been out of my life for over 2 years now. Sometimes I think about it, but at the same time, I know what Dr. Pepper will do to me. As soon as I take a drink of it, all the sodas will be fine, and I'll just be back to drinking so much sugar. And it just, but anyway. So you got to run from it. Everybody needs to understand that. And so, the mistake we make when debating whether certain things are sin or not is we forget these things are immoral, but we are not. We forget that even though we're saved, we're still prone to sin. And so we just need to, when it comes to temptation, just run. We just need to learn to recognize things and say, this is too much of a temptation for me. I can't handle it. There's some places I can't go. There are some people I can't be around. There are some things, if I get near it, I'm probably going to get in trouble. And so you just might have to be crazy strict about some things. It's okay if you do that for your family. Again, don't go trying to force those standards on everybody else. Don't go policing what everybody else does. There might be plenty of people that can control themselves around those things. But if you can't, it's okay for you to just admit it and to say, you know what, I don't mess with this stuff. In our family, we're not going to have anything to do with it. In our family, we're going to be like Mormons, or we're going to treat caffeine like alcohol. But don't apply that on the rest of us. I drink. You say, I see you drink those Ghosts, folks. That says natural caffeine. So natural, that sanctifies it, right? you got to allow something, all right. And I have done that in moderation. I have been able to control that. But Dr. Pepper, I can't. Just can't. I can't do it. So another thing we need to run from, this probably deserves a whole sermon, but I'm not going to give it one. We need to learn to just run from judging certain things. Now, this is a huge thing in our culture, in our social media generation, where everybody's got a platform, everybody's got an opinion on stuff, but there are some things we shouldn't even want to judge. There are some things we need to judge. Don't run from every judgment. Some people are running from judging things they should be judging. That person is being a coward. Some people who run from judging certain things they're being wise. So first, let me give you a few scriptures to help understand what to judge and what not to judge. But in Deuteronomy 19:16 it says, if a false witness rise up against any man to testify against him that which is wrong, then both the men between whom the controversy is shall stand before the Lord, before the priests and the judges, which shall be in those days. And the judges shall make diligent inquisition. The judges appointed judges in this situation are going to make diligent inquisition. And behold, if the witness be found to be a false witness and hath testified falsely against his brother, then shall ye do unto him as he had thought to have done unto his brother. So shalt thou put evil away from among you. And those which remain shall hear and fear, and shall henceforth commit no more any such evil among you. And thine eye shall not pity. But life shall go for life, eye for eye, tooth for tooth, hand for hand, foot for foot. And in this passage, we get a glimpse of just how important witnesses are, but also how important it is for witnesses to tell the truth. You know why? Because judging is a serious thing. When a crime is committed, it is not just a sin, for example, murder. It's not just a sin on the murderer, it's a sin on the land. And if the land wants to have that sin taken away from them, they must judge that sin appropriately, and they need to give life for life. That is a serious thing. Okay, there are some matters that the judging isn't as serious as others, but some things it is very serious. And so anybody who is judging that, they need to take it serious. They need to want to get it right. They need to follow certain laws. They need to have protocols. They need to have protocols for diligent inquisition. We need to have some real standards for what is truth. And understand, our legal system, while it has a lot of problems that we could talk about and complain about in certain areas, thankfully, it does have certain clear guidelines in areas, and we do have a pretty strict, detailed rule of law, almost to a fault, you could say, in certain areas. And that's important, but we also, in this country, while it has these laws that certain people have to live by, we also are having a problem in our country today because we have just millions of judges who are all judging every situation. We all know what happened with OJ. We all made judgment on that, didn't we? And I'm not necessarily telling you you can't, but at the end of the day, we weren't the judge, we weren't the jury. I mean, I'm not saying he was innocent, okay? I think he was guilty as all get out. But at the end of the day, when it comes to these things, it is important that we get it right. And we need to take these things serious. It's super wicked to turn a blind eye to what's going on. For example, too, if something bad happens in this church, if somebody were to violate a child in this church, it would be very wicked for us as a church. It would be wicked for you as a congregation. I just don't want to judge this. No, actually, there are some things the church is supposed to judge. There is this wicked, perverted, messed up, foolish, lazy, pathetic, teaching out there, attitude out there, that when a pastor sins, God judges them. No. Hey, if just God judges the pastor, why did he give us qualifications of a bishop? You know why? Because the church is supposed to judge that. And if a pastor sins, if he violates the qualifications of a bishop, you know what y'all are supposed to do? You're supposed to not give in to the temptation of doing nothing and turning a blind eye. That is a temptation to just do nothing. Oh, it's going to be ugly if we judge this. It's going to be ugly if we deal with this thing. I don't want to mess that. No, you need to deal with it. You need to look at it. You need to judge it, and you need to do something about it. It's wrong, and it's wicked, it's lazy, and it's pathetic to do nothing about it. There are some things we have been called to judge, but there's other things that's not our place to judge. And when it comes to those things, hey, it's okay for you to say, especially if it's a situation too that could get you in a lot of trouble, that could cause a lot of problems. For example, too, if you've got, let's just say, I'm not going to pick anybody for chance of, we'll say Jack and Jill. All right, we don't have a Jack and Jill in the church, so we've got Jack and Jill in the church. Jack and Jill are having marriage problems. Okay, Jill is a brawling woman, and her husband needs to put her in her place. She needs to be more submissive. She needs to be a better wife. Jackie's got a few issues too, but his wife's definitely worse, right? Now, the problem with that, it's Jack's responsibility to deal with Jill. It's his wife. He's the only one that can really do anything about that. The problem is, though, in our American culture, we all have an opinion about everything. And the truth is, if you and I step in and start judging things, we could actually cause more problems. And maybe Jack is dealing with it, but we're not really seeing what's going on. But then, because, Jill's, we're all just aggravated at Jill. We've all been talking about Jill and just what a brawling woman she is. And if that was our wife, what we would do. And so then Brother Ron, he just like, you know what? I'm tired of him not putting her in her place. And so he goes to put her in her place. And maybe the stuff Ron is saying is what Jack should be saying. The problem is it's Jack that should be saying it, not Ron. And now he's just made things worse. And the reality is, too, he might be wrong. Either way, he's wrong because it wasn't his place. And we've had weirdos like that in the church, too, that wanted to judge other people's wives in the church. And you know what? It didn't help. It couldn't help. But folks, is it not tempting? Have you ever been in public and you wanted to judge somebody else's kids? You see what they're doing or want to tell the parents what they should do to those kids? You can't possibly help in that situation. And sometimes when you see things like that, it's like, you know what? I've got a thought, I've got a judgment in my mind, but if I judge this situation, I'm going to get myself in trouble. I'm going to cause more problems for them. And I'm just going to have to stay out of this. I've talked about this before. I was in a situation one time where I saw a guy treating his wife terrible verbally, and I was that close to just telling him off. But I realized if I tell this idiot off, he's going to probably take out the frustrations on his wife. Because cowards like that, he wouldn't take it out on me. He would take it out on his wife. I won't help her in this situation. And so it's like, he's just being a jerk. It's not really my place. Okay, now if he just started hurting her or something like that, I could have went and dropped him on his head or something like that. I think that would have been fine because the line would have been crossed at that point. Now he's committing a crime. But at the same time, that line hadn't been crossed, so you just have to stay out of it. And sometimes, too, you might need to walk away from a situation. So, if I hang around this, I'm going to start judging, and it's going to get me in trouble, and you just got to run from it. But most of the time, what we have today, and maybe this does deserve a whole sermon, we have people running to judge things they shouldn't judge, and they're running from judging things they should be judging. Because at the end of the day, 90% of our problems is just us being carnal. And so we've got to learn to run from judging things that could get us in trouble. But one of the big problems in our modern day culture, thanks to the internet and everybody having a platform where everybody thinks they can be judged, everybody thinks they're a good judge, and everybody is judging. Everybody thinks they are witnessing things. Because did you see that video exposing this person? Well, you didn't see everything. That's the problem. And let's just admit it. Culturally, okay, now I'm going to tell you a truth about yourself that you are not going to want to admit. But it's just true. Culturally, we still love lynchings. Okay? Obviously, you don't want to physically see somebody hang, but I'm talking about lynch mobs online. We like that stuff. Hey, look, everybody's attacking this preacher today. I'm going to go watch those sermons. Why? Because you like lynchings. Ooh, this person got reprobated. That's carnal, folks. All right. So who's going to admit they like lynch mobs? All right, no, that's not right. But we do. We all want to see that. Oh, I just want to see justice done. No, you don't. You want to see somebody hang because you're bloodthirsty. And I'm speaking figuratively. I don't think any of us actually want. There's some people I wouldn't mind seeing hang, but most people we don't want to see him hang. But we do like him getting. And let me tell you. You want to talk about a real temptation, and an area too where I've probably failed before, is I have seen this even recently, leaders of lynch mobs, notorious leaders of online lynch mobs getting lynched themselves. Is that not one of the most pleasurable things? I mean, folks, when you read the story of Haman getting hung in his own gallows, that's a happy story. And I have watched many lynch mob leaders get lynched themselves by the same lynch mobs they used to run with. And I can't help but just smile a little bit. And I'm pretty sure that's sinful. But I'm working on it. I'm working on it. But anyway, while we all think we're great judges, and while for the most part that might even be true, sometimes we admit we're just not in a situation where we can make a righteous judgment. So we might have to just not be like the rest of America, and we might need to just ignore the situation and stay out of it. And if someone demands we make judgment, you need to make a judgment about this. You need to have an opinion in this situation. You know what? It's okay for us to just say, hey, I'm going to recuse myself from this as judge. It's okay to recuse yourself or to disqualify yourself from being a judge. That, hey, I don't know. There's a situation that I know of that I am somewhat aware of, but thankfully the distance is far enough from me, I don't have to make a judgment. And let me tell you, it brings me great pleasure because it's a difficult situation. It's a very difficult situation. It's an ugly situation. And I am so thankful when I heard about it, it's like, man, I don't have to do anything about that. I don't have any decisions to make. I don't have to worry. This is not my problem, and it feels pretty good. But people are out there and everybody's got opinions. And let me tell you, you better believe I've got opinions about the situation. You better believe I've got opinions about the situation. But at the same time, I understand that this is an ugly situation where I could, if I were to insert myself in this bit of drama that's going on, I would be very tempted into getting in trouble. I would be very tempted into maybe even settling a couple old scores from way back that I had forgotten about. And so it's just like, you know what? I told my wife, I was like, with this thing going around and people talking about you, I would have no idea what it is. I was like, stay out of it. I told her, like, let's just stay out of this. And it feels good to just stay out. And if anybody asks me, you know what I'm going to tell them the truth. Hey, I don't really know what's going on in that world anymore. Yeah, I don't know. I can't judge this situation. And it's okay for you to do that. Judges today, they are allowed to do that. They are able to recuse themselves from situations because of some kind of conflict of interest. But we just feel like that, and probably because of the modern news media, the internet, we feel the need to make a judgment in every situation we hear about. But not only though do we, and it's not just that we make a judgment, okay? There's nothing wrong with you having an opinion about something. If you hear about some marriage situation or whatever, it's okay for you to talk to your wife about it. It's like, yeah, I think she's a brawling woman, or it's okay for you to discuss what you think the problem is. and it's okay for you to talk about maybe how we would deal with those things that can maybe help you out. Just don't go spreading that judgment to other people, because you're only going off partial information. There's stuff you don't know. You could hurt feelings. There's a lot of potential problems there. So but understand, in America, not only do we value our opinion in a great way, but then we make it our mission to make sure that the world carries out our judgment on those people. And I've seen this happen a lot. And listen, I've got opinions on things. There are public situations with very public figures that I have expressed my opinion on before. However, when the world does not just fall in line with my opinion and follow my authority where I have no authority, you know what I don't do? I don't make it my mission to go make it happen. There are tons of preachers out there that I think are disqualified from the ministry. They have no business pastoring a church. But sometimes they have weird churches that don't care. Well, okay. I still think my opinion's right, but you know what I'm not going to do? I'm not going to make it my mission to get that church to fall in line with me. And I see people do this. They'll see something happen in the church and they just obsess themselves over just, this is my opinion and the world is not following. I've got to do something to change the world's mind. No, you don't. Hey, your opinion's I probably agree with your opinion, but that's not our place. You know, we can, and you know, you can have your opinion. You can even, if it's a public situation, and you know, because we have all these pastors out there today who have these very public ministries trying to not influence outside their own church. You even have large conferences. They have Bible colleges, and then anytime some kind of scandal happens there, you've always got these preachers. I thought we were independent Baptists. What are we doing, looking and judging what's going on in an autonomous local church? Well, it's not about this happening in some random autonomous local church. This is an influential figure who has made it their mission, and they have succeeded in influencing many churches. And so if people comment on those individuals, you know, they've put themselves in a different situation. I'm somebody myself who I have online ministry, and I try to influence people outside our church on things. And I have influenced people outside our church. So if I go and I do something immoral, guess what? We're probably going to get some scrutiny from those outside this church. And you know what I don't get to do? I thought we were independent Baptists. I thought our church was autonomous. Hey, again, they're not going after me because of anything that we're necessarily doing in here, but it's because of what we put out there publicly on the internet. So you're asking for it in that situation. So you just better watch it. But we need to understand, sometimes we're not at a proper vantage point. You know, a vantage point, it's a position or a viewpoint that provides a wide or advantageous perspective. And sometimes we can see things, but it's so far away, we might miss some details that are really important. And we've all seen examples they'll show on the internet where if you see things from one angle, it looks one way. You see it from another angle, it looks another way. And understand, it's smart for police, if a bunch of people saw things from all these different vantage points, to get all their testimony to kind of connect certain things. Because what this one person saw can give maybe certain clarity to what another person maybe didn't see. And so, but at the end of the day, the person with the best vantage point can make the best judgment. And often we can see things that look bad, but might not be what we thought. And so it's okay for us to maybe give our witness to what we saw in a situation, but at the end of the day, those who are actually going to make the judgments might come to a different conclusion because they talked to somebody who maybe had a better vantage point. Maybe somebody who's a little bit closer to the situation. And we need to be able to understand perspective. You know, the Bible says in Philippians 2:4, look not every man on his own thing, but every man also on the things of others. We often look at every situation as if, you know, only according to our own personality, our own opinions, our own circumstances, and that's just not right. You know, there's a lot of different ways we can look at things. Some people are just not in any position to judge certain things because maybe they lack knowledge, experience, or whatever to make proper judgment. You know, as a pastor, and again, it doesn't mean you can't have an opinion, but at the end of the day, it's okay for you to just recognize there's some things you don't know. For example, too, okay, in Bible colleges, all right? Tommy went to Bible college for a year. I've got tons of opinions about Bible college. But at the same time, I've never ran one. And so in many situations, he would tell me, oh, they're doing this at the college. And I was like, well, that sounds kind of weird. But you know what I always tell them? Follow the rules. Because at the end of the day, I do think pretty highly of my opinion. But I do think that there's probably people who've been involved in Bible college for 30 plus years probably know a little bit more than me. I really do think that. And so, just like, hey, you went there for them to teach you, not for you to teach them. And especially not for me to dictate how things should be done from over here. So it's just, you understand, some people have better perspective. One of the things too, I've seen examples of this before, and as a pastor, I kind of understand to a certain extent. But people always complain about scandals and abuse in the IFB and perversion. And people get really, really mad whenever a situation gets exposed and the pastor is not out there maybe just blasting this person, publicly saying things about him. But it's like, I kind of understand it because, let's just say, for example, again, we'll use Jack and Jill. Okay, and Jack and Jill, they have 4 kids. Got Jack, and let's say Jack does something really bad. Jack gets busted. Jack goes to jail. As a pastor, now, Jack's taken care of. He's no longer a danger. But I still need to think about his wife and children. And it's not really going to help them if I'm up here just exposing everything about Jack, talking about all the things that Jack has done. And again, the mobs out there that just hate the IFB, they're wanting me to do something they want me to talk about. They want me to have all these things. But it's like, hey, he's already dealt with. He's no longer a danger. He's not a problem anymore. And I've seen it too in even situations where the pastor went and killed himself. Well, he's not really a danger anymore. But then everybody wants everybody out there. Everybody needs to call him out. Everybody needs to say something. Well, here's the problem. The people close to them understand they have a wife and children who are innocent in this situation. We're trying to take care of them. And so maybe if that pastor doesn't want to talk publicly about this, maybe you ought to respect it and leave him alone. And there's no evidence he covered anything up. But, there's so much more I could say on this subject. And a lot of scriptures I want to go into. We're not going to take time. I'm out of time. I might need to preach more on this in the future. But we need to learn to recognize conflicts of interest. Sometimes we do. It's like, you know what? I can't judge this situation because I just hate this person too much. In fact, did you know, in the Old Testament, we're not going to take time to read it, but in case of manslaughter, if somebody accidentally killed somebody, one of the things it says in there, it says, and if they hated him not in time past. And so, well, if it was an accident, what matters if he hates him or if he didn't hate him? It was still an accident. I mean, is it not possible to accidentally kill somebody you hate? It's possible, but that seems kind of convenient. And so since this is a situation where this is a tough thing to judge, the fact that you hated somebody in the past, that's just a little too convenient. We're going to have to judge this a little bit different. And again, and if all the people that you're buddies with, you're super gracious and merciful and all that, but then with all the people you hate, condemnation, hardcore, hang them, stone them, eye for eye tooth. Maybe you just need to recognize when it comes to this particular situation, forgive us if we don't care about your judgment. We know you hate this person. So guess what? Your judgment's no good. Your judgment stinks in this situation. And yeah, just all you have to do is look at the way Republicans act about tax increases when Republicans do it versus when Democrats do it. Isn't that interesting? Look at the way Republicans are about increased spending when Republicans do it and how they react when Democrats do it. Isn't that interesting how that works? And guess what? Baptists are the same way. They are the same way. When there is sin in their camp, none of us are perfect, you holier than thou. But when it's sin in another camp, man, we can't stand for this. We're going full Achan on them. Hey, you're troubler of Israel, we're going to destroy you. And you know what? That is very wicked. And since when we're in a situation where we're very prone to do that kind of thing or likely to do that, just run from it. And it's not you being a coward, it's you being wise. So learn from that. Let's pray. Dear Lord, we thank you so much for your word. I pray, Lord, this was a help to everybody. Help us, Lord, to be bold and to take stands and to not move in the areas where what you've called us to do that. But Lord, help us to understand there is a time to flee. There is a time to run. Help us to recognize those things. Help us to recognize the danger and the potential problems that can come from those things, and help us to have the wisdom to put up guardrails in our life so we will not mess up in those things. In your name we pray. Amen.